And I think the number one question was about bass. How do I make bass sound good in a small space? And, maybe I can give a couple thoughts and then you guys can correct me. My understanding is that, the dimensions of the room and the materials are going to dictate largely what your room is going to sound like on the very low end. You can do a lot more to absorb high end, reflect things, whatever, and you guys can give thoughts on that. But by and large, even if you have great speakers that have a great extended low end, you are kind of stuck with the dimensions of the room that you have. For example, the room that I'm in here, we ran into that where the mix position, it was constructed professionally and all of that, but there's still just a little bit around like 30, 32 hertz, which is just getting canceled. And, maybe we can get some more subs in here and go real crazy and try to push beyond it. But I think that's something that everybody deals with in any temporary studio. Do you guys have thoughts on bass generally, or how people should be thinking about their little apartment studio?
Yeah. I mean, bass is everything in making rooms sound good. Highs and mids, you can basically do with stuff off the shelf. You can do it with your GIKs and your real traps, and the really challenging thing that again isn't common knowledge. Like when you look at, let's say you go on GIK's website and you
what is GIK?
GIK is probably the main seller of acoustic panels. So, think real traps or LA sound panels, or, the stuff John Hunter does or whatever. And, the typical 4-inch panel that you see in a producer or mixer studio. People call them bass traps, but they don't actually absorb any bass.
No.
So, and it's very...
Why do people call them bass traps? It's literally, they don't do anything to the bass.
They really don't. And it's part of it is marketing from people who don't know any better, and part of it is marketing from people who do know better and are taking advantage of people, which is...
Can we just say this? You cannot get panels... You cannot get panels that are this thick to do anything significant to super low frequencies. They just don't do it.
That's exactly it. And the 30-second version of why is, let's imagine that you and I are in the same room, Matt, and we're talking. Sound is traveling from my vocal cords to your ears by moving air particles. So it's literally air particles moving through the air. And when we think about what mineral wool is, fiberglass, any of those things, it's a bunch of fibers. And imagine these are the air particles moving, carrying the energy from my voice. They literally rub off the fibers and turn that energy into heat. So if I'm talking to you and we grab a typical bass trap and put it between us, we'll hear it attenuating the sound of my voice, right? But the problem is that as you get close to boundaries, air doesn't move anymore. So this is a wall. This is the sound of my voice. It comes to the boundary and there's nowhere to go. So what happens is that as you approach the boundary, I'm simplifying a lot, but as you approach the boundary, instead of velocity, air velocity being the means of carrying sound, it changes to air pressure variation, right? And mineral wool doesn't do anything to absorb air pressure. Now, there's lots of sort of caveats to what I just said, but ultimately the simple takeaway is mineral wool panels work great at highs and mids. And if they're deep enough, they can work pretty well at upper bass frequencies. But at low frequencies on the boundary, you need a different type of absorber. And there are different things. We use a lot of what are called limp membrane absorbers. And GIK sell some off-the-shelf versions. There aren't really many other off-the-shelf versions. The ones we use in our projects like Kean's are big and custom made and relatively expensive, but they're the only thing that will actually absorb a bunch of low energy at a boundary and give you that sort of sense of tightness. So you're kind of saying, okay, great, but back to our sort of client who's a producer in a bedroom who can't afford, doesn't have the space, is in a rented thing, doesn't want to build a custom membrane for the rear wall. The way we think about small rooms is that you're not going to, we can't absorb that energy and we can't afford it, So what we do is put you in you and the speakers and maybe the client couch in the couple of places where the bass response is the best behaved. And in regular kind of square or rectangular rooms, that's fairly predictable. There are a couple of key places in the room where the room modes sort of interact in a fairly benign way. So it won't be perfect, but it'll be better than anywhere else in the room in terms of evenness and the time domain stuff.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. We don't have sponsors. We don't run ads. We don't have a Patreon. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks.